Hey, it's Josh, aka Spyglass. A while ago, I recreated some songs, and I think one of my most accurate ones, since that wasn't always the goal, but this one I felt the need to, was with the Verve's Bittersweet Symphony. It's really repetitive, so it was really easy to program and play some stuff. But I did a lot of layering and some unique things that I don't know were done in the original. Obviously, the song itself is based on Andrew Oldham Orchestra's performance of, I think his name's David Whitaker, who he did a sort of orchestral arrangement of the Rolling Stones the last time. And so they just kind of took that and modified it a bit and became an international hit. So I wanted to recreate it. So I did sort of a mixture of the two versions. So why don't we start right at the top here? Obviously, the first thing you hear are these high strings. And that sort of repeats throughout the whole song. And that I just used Cinematic Studio solo strings. I just used the violins for the high stuff and just made it your standard like vibrato longs. At the same time, I also use the Valiant Samples Quarterone Guitar Reveries. This is one of my favorite libraries at the moment. I use it for a lot of things. It's got a lot of great pad type stuff you can do with it. And I use the summer pad is what it's called. And I just do the same thing. Let me bring this over. You can see I follow along. Now I keep these E and B because the song's in E. And that's really just to make the low end a little more rounded out because you saw how thin these sounded. So I'll start it again and then add the guitar reveries into it. So you see it fills it out a little more, and obviously there's some release on the pad there, so it just helps create more air and space into there. But I also copied the same track from the guitar reveries to just a contact synth pad here. So here's what that sounds like. Sort of just like a standard synth string sound. And again, that was just to aid the sound to go with those high strings, so all three together. So it's just a much more full sound. At the same time that that comes in, there is this cello line that you can hear underneath it, playing just sort of the acting as like the bass for it. So here's what the cello of the song sounds like. And I kept a lot of vibrato on there because I wanted there to be some action since this is repetitive and you got these high strings and then just a separate low thing. The vibrato just kind of keeps it from being stale and dry. So the actual low strings, I did the same thing here. You could see a higher velocity, but the same notes. And what I did was I did the full ensemble of the solo strings, but you could see I just did the violins, I should say. Whereas on the cello line, it is just the cello, and I did a mix of microphones, so it kind of pushes it into a room a little bit. So here's just the strings. So now to get to the most recognizable thing of this song is that high, like ostinato of these strings here. So pretty basic. The one trick I had to figure this out was the timing on it. It actually doesn't start on the one, as you can see right here. It starts on, like if you were to count one and two and, it starts on the one and. Or you could think of it as the two, if you were to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, just however you want to count it, whether it's two, I'm sorry, if it's 4 or 8. It's just that second note there. And you can hear a couple things. These are just your standard staccato notes, and then this was more of a sforzando at the end of each one, which is why the velocities are turned down, so it doesn't just rip into it. So watch these green notes, and that'll be your sforzando, because if you listen to the actual track, it is a little bit more of an extended articulation at the very end. Now, the only thing I did was, as you can see, I did these octaves here, just in a lower velocity. And more than anything, it's because these are such high strings, just like with layering those other tracks. It was just to create a little more depth to it. And so you don't really notice this, especially in the full mix. But I think having it there really sort of, it's one of those things you don't really notice, but if it's gone, you may notice. But the other reason I did it is because if you see the high strings go away and then it's just the lower octave. The reason why I did that is if you listen to the actual song, during the singing, during the verses, these go away. But in between his lines, you still sort of hear it. It's just not as present. So I don't know if in the original song they just turned it down in the mix, or if, say, the actual recording of it was based on, playing it softer, or maybe they did play a different octave. I don't know. But the way I recreated it is right when he starts singing, the higher strings end, and then in between the vocal lines, you just hear the pops of the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So I can give you an example of that, which is if I go to the vocal line, which I did with cello. So I'll start with the last iteration, and then you'll hear the vocal line of the cello, which is the Spitfire solo cello, because it's really good with legato. And then it'll go just to the lower octaves here. So it's kind of in the background during the actual vocal part, and then in between the lines, you hear that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that's the way it is in the actual song. Now, speaking of the vocal part, I also doubled that with the Sonicature nickel harpas, because I used the cello of it because I wanted to keep it low, but this also helped give it a more full sound. So here's what the nickel harpa sounds like. So it sounds kind of goofy on its own, and that's why you can see I have a lower volume than I do for the cello. And again, that was just to kind of round out the sound more. So if I put them together. So it almost sounds like a double track, or almost just a very, very, very slight sort of chorusing, like there's that delay at the signals, and that was the entire purpose. And just like with the other stuff, in a full mix, it makes a lot more sense instead of just on its own. A few basic things. Obviously, I did the drums and bass. I just mimicked the actual song, which sounds like this. And so for those, I just used the upright bass because I didn't want it to have, from Contact, I didn't want it to just have like a super sharp attack. I just wanted that thud sound. And it also sounds really good with those staccato notes that it plays. And then for the drums, I just programmed the Get Good P4 kit, which I absolutely love and try to use it on everything since I've gotten it. And again, just full recreation of the actual song. A few little notes about this. The snare I used was the Bronze Custom because it just has a more full sound to it. And then the, where's it at? The hi-hat I used, you can see on the closed, it's edge closed as opposed to tight. So it like sizzles a little bit more. And again, just to really take up the space. So pretty basic. There are those runs at the end before the drums come in, which is this. And so that's just another ensemble patch, although I accentuate the longs with some Spitfire Oliver Arnold's Chamber Evolution, so together. And in the mix, it sounds like this. So you're probably saying to yourself, hey, I heard a bell. That's correct. If you listen to the songs, particularly the Andrew Oldham orchestra version, you'll hear this bell sound in it. And I just used Native Instruments tubular bell. And it happens on the 4 of the that staccato piece. So you have the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, but on the 4 of each of those, you hear a bell. Sorry, I should say, at least in this section during like the verses. So listen to the staccato with the bell on those 4s. So it's only on the first iteration. I can't remember offhand if both versions, how exactly they do it, but I didn't want to overwhelm the song because it's instrumental. I felt if it got too repetitive in that nature, it wouldn't be as interesting. And the same goes for tambourine. You can hear a tambourine with the drums, but I didn't want it on every snare hit or every like 4 or every 3 whenever the snare hits. So you can see I don't even use it for a while, and then I don't use it on every snare hit. So here's how those two are together. So obviously the drums, he hits a 1, and then a 2, and then a 1, and then a 3. So I just have the tambourine only on the single hit. I think they use more tambourine, like maybe they just do it very evenly spaced. But again, I didn't want to overwhelm it because if you just hear a ton of tambourine, it sounds kind of funny to me. What I did do at the end is you could see I added more here. Oops. And that's because this is sort of like the climax. It's after the verse ends, and so everything just comes up. I think that section is more likely how they did it in the real song. So I just do it at the end, spaces it out. Another thing I do is I have these synth bells from Native Instruments, and it sounds similar to the tubular bell, but it's higher pitched. And you can hear it goes along with the 1, 2, 3s of the staccato, and I also do it with the bells. It sounds much more big. It almost makes me think of like Home Alone music. So if I have the drums back in there, and let's do the staccato, and here's all that together. And then, you know what, I'll even throw the tambourine in there. And really what this does is kind of crescendos everything. Like you tone it down during the singing so the voice comes through, like I take down those strings and some of that, and then once the singing's over, I bring all this back in. So here it is together. So I think that is a pretty cool sound. Let me unmute all this stuff. So you can see it's all pretty repetitive. The drums keep repeating, the bass keeps repeating, the staccato rhythm keeps repeating, the long strings keep repeating. The one thing I do is I accentuate the vocals a little bit, and this will be the last thing we'll go over here, because I think you get the picture. So after the second line, just over the third and fourth, you can see I have these long strings here. It follows the exact same thing as the vocal pattern. So, but what it is consordino strings on the solo strings here. And I use the full range there, all the strings there. And the reason why I do that is because the solo will be by the cello will be by itself, but then these things come in here to mimic it. The longs come in to mimic it, and it's like a full orchestra. And so it's kind of like like more voices are joining him, sort of like a choir essentially. And then I have this viola doing the same thing, but I have a room mic to again put it in the back of a room and open it up. So what I'll do is also have these long strings here, which kind of just mimic other strings without following the vocal line. So let me start before the longs mimic the vocal. I'll go to the second line, and we'll just run through this and be done. So it's like the bunch of extra people joining in, and it really just pushes it and heightens the emotion in it. So why don't I start at the last line and I'll play you out. That is how I recreated this. Just pretty straightforward instruments, and then a few, no puns intended, bells and whistles to sort of change and fill up the sound, like the pad and the synth strings and all that. So here's the outro. Thanks for watching.